The contract is terminated, effective immediately. My name is Elijah Vance. I'm 51 years old, and for 22 years, I have been the bedrock of Crestline Development, a name synonymous with prestige black-owned commercial real estate in Atlanta. When Dominique, the new CEO, spoke those words, the air went colder than the marble floor of the conference room. I stood up slowly from the leather chair, placing my hands on the mahogany table. My suit, a custom-tailored navy wool, felt heavier than usual. I trust the bid for the Peachtree Revival project goes smoothly on Tuesday, I said. The tone was level, polite. Dominique, 34 and fresh out of a Wharton MBA program, frowned. Her sleek glasses reflected the cold fluorescent light. She'd been brought in 6 months ago by the retiring founder's son, Marcus, to streamline our firm. She'd never closed a single commercial property deal in Atlanta's volatile market before. "What do you mean, Elijah?" she asked, a sliver of annoyance in her voice. I gave her a knowing look, the one you give a novice who just pushed all their chips into the pot without looking at their cards. "You'll find out, Dominique. You'll figure it out." I walked out, leaving my team, people I'd mentored, coached, and fought for, sitting in stunned silence. 22 years of shaping the city skyline were now fitting into 3 storage crates. The bronze plaque commemorating my role in the Midtown Renaissance. The framed blueprint of the first high-rise I ever secured funding for. The greatest grandpa coffee mug for my granddaughter, Imani. Dominique hovered near my office door. "Elijah, about the municipal zoning approvals for Peachtree." "Not my burden to bear anymore," I told her, taping up the final box of legal documents. I felt a surge of something sharper than betrayal. It was the calm before the storm. The truth was, I'd been ready for this. Ever since Dominique arrived, she'd been undermining me, rerouting critical emails, calling meetings with the City Council Zoning Committee without me, and questioning my old-school methods of relationship-based development. Last month, I overheard her telling Marcus that my deep community ties and insistence on using local, minority-owned subcontractors were financially inefficient deadweight. What she didn't know was that in my 2 decades of securing multi-million-dollar deals and navigating Atlanta's intricate political landscape, I had learned to document everything. Every slight, every meeting she excluded me from, every contradictory email she sent. I had also been preparing for this worst-case scenario. When you're entrusted with building the literal foundation of a city's growth, you learn to stress test the structure before the wind hits. My wife, Nia, was waiting when I pulled my black Ford F-150 into the driveway, the crates clanking softly in the bed. She was a realtor, a brilliant mind who understood the value of land and the fragility of trust better than anyone. "How rough was the landing?" she asked, handing me a glass of sweet tea. "Could be worse," I said. But looking at those boxes, I knew Dominique had made a critical error. She thought development was about spreadsheets and models. She didn't realize the Peachtree Revival project wasn't built on paper. It was built on promises. The presentation on Tuesday was a final step, a $75 million bid to redevelop 5 acres of prime urban land. I had spent 8 months preparing. I hadn't just studied the financial models. I had spent time with the neighborhood association presidents, the minority business owners, and the city council members. I knew Councilwoman Baker's priority was job creation for residents, not just profit margins. I knew Mayor Jenkins wouldn't sign off unless the project included a dedicated space for local, independent artists. Dominique knew about the bid, but she didn't know the key. The presentation wasn't a standard pitch deck. It was a community covenant, a tailored document addressing every single non-financial requirement put forth by the stakeholders. The irony was beautiful. She'd fired me to look forward thinking. But on Tuesday morning, when the City Council's Development Committee called for Elijah Vance specifically, she'd learned the difference between managing a department and managing a legacy. That Sunday night, I couldn't sleep. Not from worry, but from anticipation. Nia found me in my home office at 3 a.m. "You're plotting," she stated, sipping her own tea. "Just thinking," I replied, "about what Dominique thought she could steal." Nia finished, sitting across from my desk. She'd been there for every late night, every community meeting. She knew what I'd built. "What did you tell her?" "Nothing." I'm no longer her consultant. That's when the full scope of her mistake solidified. Dominique hadn't just fired me. She had willfully jettisoned 22 years of institutional knowledge, the specific cultural priorities of the committee members, the unwritten rules of negotiation, the precise requirements needed to win the Peachtree contract. She thought she could wing it, show up with a glossy presentation, and charm her way through the committee. She had no idea that they would be expecting the hyper-detailed Community Impact Statement, CIS, I had promised, a document that existed only in my head and in the handwritten notes they'd never find. My phone buzzed. A text from Rashid, my former senior project manager. She's been in your office all weekend, looking for files. Seems panicked. I texted back, files are on the server. She has access to everything, which was true. She had access to the standard financial projections, the CAD drawings, the legal framework. What she lacked was the context, the cultural element that turned a profitable building into a valuable community anchor. I spent the rest of the night reaching out to contacts at other development firms, people who had tried to recruit me for years. By Monday morning, I had 2 informal offers and 1 scheduled interview with Sterling Holdings, a competitor known for its commitment to socially responsible development. Tuesday morning, 9:51 a.m. I was sitting in a quiet cafe in the West End, away from the downtown noise, when my phone started vibrating. Dominique, I let it go to voicemail. Then again, and again. By 10:15 a.m., I had 5 missed calls. At 10:23 a.m., Rashid called, his voice strained. Elijah, where are you? The development committee is here, and Dominique is melting down. They are asking for the detailed CIS breakdown, and she can't find it. It's on the server. I said, calm as a lake. She says it's not. She's pulling her hair out. She said the folder is empty except for a basic zoning map. That's because the specific community requirements in the full CIS were never digitized. I explained, taking a sip of my espresso. They're in my notebook, the leather-bound black one that was always on my desk. Rashid went silent for a moment. They're asking for you. Councilman Hayes said he was specifically looking forward to reviewing the minority subcontractor allocation protocols you designed. Wish I could help. At 10:45 a.m., Marcus, the CEO, called. Elijah, I need you to come in. There's been a massive misunderstanding. No misunderstanding. Marcus, I was terminated yesterday. Effective immediately. I believe Dominique used those exact words. Look, we can work this out. Maybe Dominique was hasty. Maybe she was. But I'm not an employee anymore. I can't legally represent Crestline in a client pitch. Then name your rate. Consult us. I'm not available. I had a final interview with Sterling Holdings at 2 p.m. By 11:30 a.m., according to Rashid's follow-up text, the committee had walked out. They gave Dominique 20 minutes to produce the documentation I had promised. When she couldn't deliver, they politely excused themselves and ended the meeting early. Dominique called at noon. I answered, Elijah, you have to help me. This is sabotage. No, Dominique, this is consequence. I can report you for corporate sabotage, withholding company information. What information? I removed personal property from my office. The notebooks were mine. All official company files remain on the server. You, yourself, stated my old-school approach of handwriting critical agreements was inefficient. You failed to digitize them. That was your choice, not my sabotage. She hung up. 10 minutes later, Crestline Security called, demanding I return all company notebooks. I told them to check my employment contract. Personal notebooks purchased with personal funds remain personal property. By 3 p.m., after a very promising final interview with Sterling Holdings, I had my answer to Dominique's accusation. This wasn't sabotage. Sabotage implied I actively worked to damage them. I had done nothing but take my deep-seated knowledge with me when they showed me the door. The fact that she hadn't bothered to learn the difference between a financial model and a community relationship, that was her failure. The fact that she had fired the only person who held the keys to their biggest account, that was a decision. I had spent 22 years building something valuable. Dominique had spent 6 months destroying its foundation. Now, she was learning what that knowledge was actually worth. That evening, Sterling Holdings offered me the position, Executive Vice President of Strategic Development, a 30% salary increase, full benefits, and equity options. I accepted. My phone buzzed. A text from Rashid, Councilwoman Baker Cold. She wants to know if you're available for freelance consultation on a new proposal. Apparently, they are very unhappy with Crestline's lack of preparedness. I texted back, tell her I'm not available, but she might want to consider Sterling Holdings for their upcoming development needs. Sometimes, the best revenge is simply stepping out of the way and letting people face the consequences of their own incompetence. 6 months later, I sat in the executive boardroom at Sterling's expanded offices. The Peachtree Revival Project, the $75 million bid, had been awarded to Sterling Holdings 3 weeks after I joined. Nia was now the head of residential leasing for Sterling's new projects, including Peachtree. Rashid was running my former department, now tripled in size, as vice president of commercial development. We had brought over 3 more talented, loyal associates from Crestline. We weren't running from something. We were building something better. That afternoon, I received an email. Marcus Vance, the CEO of Crestline, wanted to meet. We met downtown. Marcus looked haggard. Elijah, I owe you an apology, he said. A big one. Dominique cost us 4 major accounts. We had to lay off 20 people. Our reputation in the city is in the gutter. How's Dominique? I fired her a month ago. Effective immediately. He stirred his coffee slowly. I heard about your success at Sterling. Would you consider coming back? I'll offer you the COO position. Full authority. I'm happy where I am, Marcus. It's not about the money. Then what is it about? Trust. When you hired Dominique, you chose to believe that my relationships, the relationships that kept Crestline afloat for 2 decades, didn't matter. That was your choice. The damage is done. Your clients don't trust Crestline anymore. And frankly, I don't trust you not to make the same mistake again. Marcus left without finishing his coffee. I felt no anger, only the deep satisfaction of knowing that the true value of my legacy wasn't in the buildings I erected, but in the relationships I cultivated. Dominique thought the revenge would be financial, but the true poetic justice was this. In trying to prove that relationships don't matter, she destroyed the very thing that made the company competitive. In trying to show that my experience was replaceable, she gave it directly to their biggest rival. My story, the story of the Crestline mistake, is now being taught in development courses. And as my granddaughter Moni starts her first internship with Sterling Holdings next summer, I know the best revenge wasn't the check or the title, but the fact that I got to build a new dynasty on the solid foundation of my old one.